Hello friends, and welcome to another episode. In this video, we invite you to join us for a trip down the strange rabbit hole that some refer to as the Bennington Triangle. The area known as the Bennington Triangle, which surrounds Glastonbury Mountain in the New England state of Vermont, has a long, strange history of bizarre occurrences. This includes UFO sightings, Bigfoot encounters, eerie lights and sounds, and the triangle also happens to be the location of several unsolved disappearances during the 1940s and 1950s. If that isn't odd enough, according to Native American lore, the area is heavily cursed. The Native American tribes of New England have always known something was off with the area and tend to steer clear of it at all costs. One particularly chilling legend from the Algonquin tribe cautions of the existence of what are described as evil rocks in the mountains, which have the ability to spring open and devour those unfortunate enough to step upon them. Now, this is rather interesting, considering how people have vanished without a trace from within the triangle. New England author Joseph A. Citro is the person considered to have coined the term Bennington Triangle in 1992 while doing a radio broadcast about paranormal and other unusual activity in the area. According to Citro's findings, he states that the area has similar characteristics with the equally strange Bridgewater Triangle in the bordering state of Massachusetts, which has been written about extensively by cryptozoologist Loren Coleman. The Bennington Triangle is centered around the heavily wooded forest of Glastonbury Mountain and also includes the small towns of Bennington, Woodford, and Shaftesbury, and also the abandoned or ghost towns of Somerset and Glastonbury. Over the last 200 years, there have been many encounters with and sightings of a Bigfoot-like cryptid in the area surrounding Glastonbury Mountain. The locals, as well as paranormal and cryptozoological investigators, refer to this unknown creature as the Bennington Monster. The earliest recorded sightings of the beast occurred in the early 1800s, when a stagecoach loaded with passengers was forced to stop its journey due to a heavily washed-out section of the stage road. The driver of the stagecoach observed that there were very large footprints in the mud, which were way too large to belong to any human. While the perplexed driver was pondering these prints, the stagecoach was suddenly attacked by a large creature that was strong enough to flip the stagecoach over onto its side. The terrified passengers stated that they observed a frightening pair of large eyes peering into the overturned coach at them before whatever the creature was screamed and then ran off to disappear in the surrounding woods. The passengers would later describe the monster as a large, hairy, black creature well over 6 feet in height. The area has long been rife with tales of people suddenly going missing within the area of the triangle. One of the oddest disappearances was that of a man named Carol Herrick in 1943. Herrick disappeared while on a hunting trip just a few miles northeast of the abandoned town of Glastonbury. Although his body was found 3 days later, it was observed to be surrounded by dozens of footprints too large for a normal person. It was also determined that Carol appeared to have been squeezed to death. Then, beginning in 1945 and continuing for the next 5 years, people began to go mysteriously missing from the area with an alarming regularity. A man named Mitty Rivers, a 74-year-old hunting guide very familiar with the area, went missing on November 12, 1945. Rivers, who had led many hunting parties in the area over decades, was taking a group of 4 hunters to the oddly named Hell Hollow area, which is located within the southwest forest of Glastonbury. While leading the hunting party back to camp, he somehow got ahead of the other 4 and, for reasons unknown, never returned to the campsite. At first, the other hunters were not overly concerned, as they knew Mitty to be an expert woodsman and knowledgeable guide. When Rivers still had failed to return the next day, The authorities were contacted and an extensive search was held, comprising as many as 300 worried locals, as well as a number of U.S. Army soldiers who had been dispatched from nearby Fort Devens in Massachusetts. They searched through the deep woods for 8 straight days, but the only possible evidence found was an ammo cartridge for the same type rifle that Rivers was known to be carrying. The cartridge was found in a shallow stream, and there was no evidence of any foul play or animal attack nearby. Although they had no luck with the extensive search effort, many of Mitty's friends and those local to the area were sure with the man's knowledge of the woods and survival skills he would eventually return. However, this never came to be, and no trace of the missing guide has ever been found. The area from which Rivers vanished is near Long Trail Road and Vermont State Route 9. The very next year, on Sunday, December 1st, 1946, an 18-year-old college student named Paula Weldon went missing while hiking in the same area around Long Trail Road. Easily remembered because she was wearing a bright red jacket, several people recalled seeing her that day, including a shop clerk in Bennington who had provided her with directions, and also a couple of elderly hikers who had been approximately 300 feet behind her on the trail for part of their hike. The alarm was sounded when the college sophomore didn't show up the next morning for her classes at Bennington College. An extensive search was launched by local authorities and included more than 1,000 volunteer searchers. There were also searches conducted from the air, and with the assistance of the FBI, and a $5,000 reward was offered. When interviewed, the elderly couple who had observed Paula hiking just ahead of them on the trail stated that after they watched her turn a corner on the trail, she seemed to have just vanished. Despite the extensive searches and the offer of the $5,000 reward, no trace of Paula Weldon has ever been found, and her fate remains unknown. Exactly 3 years to the day of the disappearance of Paula Weldon, a man named James Tedford suddenly vanished from a bus on December 1st, 1949. A military veteran and resident of the local Bennington Soldiers' Home, Tedford was returning via bus from St. Albans, where he'd been visiting relatives, when he vanished. Based on eyewitness accounts, Tedford and 13 other passengers were on the bus at the previous stop before the bus had arrived in Bennington. But when the bus pulled into the station, he had somehow disappeared. His bags were still in the luggage rack, and a bus schedule was found lying open on his now empty seat. The other passengers stated that they didn't see Tedford get off the bus at any of the previous stops, and he wasn't on the bus when it pulled into Bennington. Authorities investigated the disappearance and were convinced that no one had seen anything, and there were no suspicious incidents which had occurred during the bus trip. One strange and interesting fact: it should be noted that Tedford's wife, Pearl, had also vanished under mysterious circumstances a couple of years prior. Now, there aren't many details about his early life, but in 1940, Tedford was listed as a resident in Franklin, Vermont, with his wife, Pearl, who was much younger, her age being 28 while he was 56. The strangeness began following Tedford's return to Vermont after the end of his second round of military service near the end of World War II. Upon his return, he found that Pearl had vanished, no trace of her to be found, and the house the couple had rented in Franklin, Vermont, was found to have been left abandoned. Tedford's family claimed no knowledge as to the whereabouts of the missing wife, and stated the last time they had seen her was as she was on her way to the Amoco gas station in Franklin. There was speculation among the locals that rather than having met with foul play, she had understandably grown tired of waiting for her much older husband to return from war and had simply taken off. Whatever the cause, she was never to be seen or heard from again. Tedford was crushed and moved into the local home for soldiers, where he still lived when he vanished. The next year, On October 12, 1950, an 8-year-old boy named Paul Jepson was the next in the area to go missing. Jepson was last seen in the cab of his mother's pickup truck in Bennington, where she had left him to play while she briefly tended to her pigs. When the mother returned, she found that the boy was gone. She quickly looked for him in the nearby immediate area with no luck, after which she reported him missing, and soon hundreds of volunteers had assembled to help search for the missing boy. Tracking dogs were brought in to aid in the search for the missing boy. The dogs were able to pick up his scent and followed it towards Glastonbury Mountain. However, when the scent was lost at a nearby crossroads, it was thought that perhaps the boy had either been abducted by a stranger or had otherwise accepted a ride in a passing automobile. Paul's father stated that, oddly enough, the boy had talked about visiting the mountain almost non-stop for the last week or so. The area around Glastonbury Mountain was searched extensively for the next several days, but sadly no trace of Paul has ever been found. Then, 16 days after Paul Jepson's mysterious disappearance, a woman named Frida Langer disappeared on October 28, 1950. Frida was camping with several other family members in the forest near Glastonbury Mountain. Langer, then aged 53, along with her cousin, Herbert Elsner, had ventured away from the family's woodland campsite to go on a hike near the Somerset Reservoir. They had managed to hike just a few hundred yards from their campsite when Frida lost her footing and fell into a mountain stream, completely soaking her shoes and clothing. Due to the chilly fall temperature in the mountains, Frida told her cousin to wait while she ran back to their campsite to change into some dry clothes. Her cousin stated that he waited for what seemed like a sufficient amount of time, and when Frida still hadn't returned, he decided to go back to the camp to see if she was okay. However, upon his return, he was shocked to learn that Frida hadn't returned to the campsite at all. She had instead apparently vanished in broad daylight in the distance of a few hundred yards. Frida was reported missing, and over the next several weeks, search parties, with as many as 400 people, including concerned volunteers, law enforcement, firefighters, and military, as well as some aircraft, searched for her and came up empty-handed. Sadly, the search was eventually abandoned. 7 months later, however, on May 12, 1951, Frida's body was discovered near Somerset Reservoir. Strangely enough, in an area that had been extensively searched many times previously. The advanced decomposition of her remains meant that no cause of death could be determined, and her case is still unsolved. And then, just as strangely and suddenly as they had begun, the string of disappearances stopped. Frida Langer was the last person to vanish mysteriously during this time frame, and the only missing persons whose remains were found. Other than the geographic locations and time frame, no other connection has been discovered that tie these cases to one another, although some have speculated that a serial killer may be responsible for these strange disappearances. Some blame the Native American curse, or simply claim that the paranormal is to blame, as there appears to be an active portal here into the unexplained. There's also the theory that the area is very unstable due to the unusually chaotic and confusing wind and weather patterns on the mountain, which can cause people to easily become disoriented and then lost as a result. Regardless of what is to be believed, the Bennington Triangle is known to be home to strange and mysterious paranormal phenomena. As well as the aforementioned Bigfoot encounters and the string of mysterious disappearances, there are many reports of strange floating orbs of light, sightings of other bizarre forest creatures, and even the occasional UFO sighting. Now, while researching and writing this episode, I was a little bit hesitant at first to recount some of the bizarre stories being found. However, after giving it some careful consideration in the broader scope of things, I realized that in a world where people can literally turn a corner on a mountain trail and seemingly disappear from the face of the earth while leaving absolutely no trace in the process, and we have covered disappearances from Mount Shasta in previous videos. Well, then maybe some of these stories and legends aren't as far-fetched as first perceived. With that said, let's begin, shall we? Mount Shasta. Very few places in the United States are as completely steeped in mystery and the supernatural as Mount Shasta. Located in Northern California, only about an hour from the Oregon border, this semi-dormant volcano and the surrounding area are, according to legend, home to spirits, gods, Bigfoot, aliens, fairies, robots, ascended masters, Lemurians, occultists, underground bases, secret tunnels, and other strange entities and features. Rising to a height of 14,162 feet, Mount Shasta is an imposing figure set against a backdrop of stunning wilderness. Rugged outcrops, scenic vistas, mountain streams, waterfalls, lakes, glaciers, and caverns of various size. It truly is one of the most impressive mountains in the United States. And even though the last volcanic activity was way back in 1786, it's still currently considered active by the USGS. But aside from the beauty and natural grandeur, Mount Shasta has an ominous aura about it. The mountain does hold some dark secrets. Many consider it a place of portals to strange realms of the unexplained. The indigenous people of the area revered Mount Shasta as a magical and supernatural place many, many decades before the white man arrived in Northern California. One popular Shasta legend claims that before there were humans on the planet, the chief of the great sky spirits grew tired of his icy home in the above world. He used a stone to make a hole in the sky and shoved ice and snow into the hole. The resulting mound was what came to be known as Mount Shasta. Next, the chief of the sky climbed down onto Mount Shasta, and seeing it was barren, he chose to place trees there. And when he walked through the snow, it melted and formed streams and rivers. As the leaves began to fall from the trees, the sky chief used his breath to turn them into birds. The chief of the great sky spirits was so pleased with Mount Shasta that he chose to make it home for his family. Not missing the cold from the above world, the sky chief made a hole in the middle of the mountain and placed a fire inside it to keep his family warm. When he placed logs into the fire, the mountain would shake and emit sparks and spew fire. Although it's unknown as to exactly how Mount Shasta was named, one popular explanation states that the name comes from the Russian language. Supposedly, settlers from Russia who lived in coastal California were able to see the summit of Mount Shasta off in the distance. They referred to it as Shastal, which means white or pure in their language. This eventually came to be pronounced and shortened to just Mount Shasta. Others claim that one of the local tribes of the indigenous peoples in the area, known as the Shotstika, loved and hunted on the mountain, and it came to be named after them. Regardless of how it got to be named, nowadays Mount Shasta is a well-known and popular destination for snow skiers, hikers, hunters, anglers, spelunkers, and many others who love rugged outdoor activities. Mount Shasta is also a popular destination for New Agers and other seekers wishing to bask in the vibe of the mountain. Currently, Shasta is home to a huge amount of day spas, retreats, a Buddhist monastery, as well as a plethora of New Age consultants, Zen instructors, and those claiming to be ambassadors to space aliens and ascended masters. In fact, there is so much strangeness on the mountain, one is almost assured to have some sort of weird experience when visiting Shasta. Paranormal investigators state that the most unusual encounters usually happen when you least expect it and are far away from other people. Shaman, New Age seekers, and those trying to contact the mothership may inadvertently disturb the energies on the mountain and cause truly paranormal events to become hidden away, according to some. Nevertheless, there's been more than enough bizarre happenings in the area to suggest that there are strange powers at work here. In the lore of the Native Americans familiar with Shasta, the terms for ghost, soul, and life are very similar. According to these tribes, ghosts, which are often spotted near burial areas as flickering orbs of light, are to be feared, as merely observing them is said to be an omen foretelling bad luck or perhaps even death. Also, according to their legends, after death, the soul is said to travel west, rise into the sky, and then head into the Milky Way to the world of the afterlife. The Shasta Indians believe that singing funeral songs help the deceased spirit on its way. Also, according to Shasta traditional lore, the entire region is haunted with Oxkey, which literally translates to pains. But according to the natives, these are spiritual entities capable of taking on the form of tiny people and animals who live among the area's many boulders, lakes, summits, and also in the rapids and other tributaries of flowing water. The indigenous Shasta peoples consider the Oxkey to be the cause of all illness, bad luck, and death, and also have the ability to jump into the bodies of unsuspecting victims. According to legend, only a true shaman can exorcise away these demonic entities. In more recent and typical ghost lore, parts of Interstate 5 that run nearby the mountain are reportedly haunted by various unidentified ghosts, possibly the victims of car accidents. Or they may be tulpas or thought forms, brought about by the indigenous people of the area. Some tribes believe that talking about or merely even thinking of certain dark entities can draw them out and cause them to take form. The ruins of Old Shasta Town from the 1800s lie just south of Mount Shasta and west of Redding, California, which at one time was the county seat. The Old Town area is home to several reported ghosts, especially in the old courthouse, which claim that at night the sounds of criminal trials can still be heard, and in the Gallows Park at the back of the courthouse, where those found guilty were hung and still linger to this day. A Pioneer Babies burial spot on nearby old Highway 99, which at one time was a stagecoach road through the area, is claimed to be haunted by a particularly evil and malevolent entity. Some of the stranger stories from the area are based on the Native American legends of Shasta being home to several mysterious races of beings, which include the aforementioned little people, but also tribes of reptilians and large malevolent humanoids known as the Shupchets, who legend says live in the area of Flume Creek and secretly traverse the lava tunnels to the summit of Mount Shasta. The early white settlers in the area also told of the tunnel-traveling giants, referring to them as the Lemurians. The concept of Lemuria originally began as a rumored lost continent in the Indian Ocean from a somewhat scientific theory which explained how lemurs were able to migrate to India from Madagascar. Some folks, however, occultists and New Agers in particular, considered Lemuria as a lost continent which was home to an advanced race, the Lemurians, who were the supposed ancestors of the legendary Atlanteans of the other well-known lost continent of Atlantis. Legends state that the Lemurians are giant, human-appearing beings who bore some form of appendage on their massive forehead, which provided them with psychic powers. The story of the Lemurians on Mount Shasta mainly comes from a bizarre book called A Dweller on Two Planets, or The Dividing of the Way, which was written in the 1880s by cultist Frederick Spencer Oliver. Among other things, Oliver claimed that a secret city glittering with jewels was located inside of Mount Shasta, and he further established a connection between it and Lemuria. His writings were popular at the time, and his fantastical ideas of Mount Shasta and Lemuria were referenced and retold in many news articles and other books of that era. Along these lines of legend, there are also stories of a secret society which lives in the secret city deep inside Mount Shasta. The secret society is known as the Great White Brotherhood, Now, that's not because of the color of their skin, but rather the brilliant white light that often surrounds these beings, who also wear spotless white robes. They are said to be a fraternity of spiritually advanced beings, or ascended masters, who are drawn to Mount Shasta due to the energy found on its peak. The Brotherhood allegedly live inside of the mountain and travel through tunnels of gold to their hidden temples made of jewels and crystals. Guy W. Ballard, an occultist from Chicago, ventured to Mount Shasta in 1930 to inquire about reports from another occultist, William Paley, regarding a group of holy men called the Brotherhood of Mount Shasta, whom Paley claimed to have observed while traveling on the mountain. Ballard, along with his wife Edna, was extremely curious and ventured to Mount Shasta in hopes of contacting the ascended masters of which Paley wrote. Once, when Ballard was out on a day hike alone, he paused to rest at a clear mountain spring in the McCloud River Valley area. He claims that while resting by the stream, he was approached by a strange young man who appeared out of nowhere and offered him a drink of some creamy, milky liquid. The young stranger told Ballard that the liquid came from what he called the universal supply. Ballard states that when he drank the liquid, it had an immediate electric and clarifying effect on him, making him feel oddly energized and refreshed. The young stranger then revealed his true name, the Ascended Master Saint Germain, and was suddenly clad in a white, jeweled robe, making him appear godlike. As Ballard looked on in stunned amazement, he noticed that a mountain lion had approached him to within a few feet. Somehow able to fight off his fear of the animal, Ballard claimed that the mountain lion suddenly became as docile and playful as a kitten. At this point, Saint Germain proudly informed Ballard that he had passed the test of courage and gave him 4 small brownish cakes. Ballard ate the cakes and claimed that they further increased the clarity of the liquid he had consumed and aided him in being receptive to the master's teachings. Saint Germain stated that he had searched several continents for someone worthy to learn his instructions regarding the great laws of life, and now Ballard, his wife Edna, and their son Donald were chosen to be his accredited messengers. After a series of meetings with the Ascended Master, Ballard claims he was able to channel Saint Germain's wisdom and plans for implementing the 7th Golden Age, the I Am, which Germain stated would bring about a new age of earthly perfection. Ballard further claimed that through channeling Saint Germain, he was also able to view his own past lives and claimed that he had been George Washington in a previous life. When Ballard returned to Chicago in 1931, he set about putting Saint Germain's plans for the New Age of Enlightenment in motion. By 1932, Ballard and his wife Edna had founded the I Am religious sect, the Saint Germain Press, and the Saint Germain Foundation. Ballard, using the pseudonym Godfrey Ray King, began turning out books, pamphlets, and articles about his new religion. By 1936, Ballard had amassed a large literary collection of several books, compilation of songs and affirmations, as well as a periodical magazine. Ballard had no problem drawing crowds who came to listen to he and Edna channel Saint Germain's teaching, and soon schools and reading rooms began to spring up, and by 1938, the sect had almost 3 million devotees. Skeptics claimed that the new religion was nothing but old, recycled cult practices, and when Guy died in 1939, although his wife Edna claimed that he had not passed on but rather ascended, many of the devoted became disillusioned with Ballard's rather ordinary departure from this plane and stopped attending the meetings. After recovering from alleged mail fraud charges, the I Am movement, although now considerably smaller, survives until this day. The I Am Reading Room in the town of Mount Shasta offers Ballard's channeled writings, Ascended Master and I Am art, and I Am musical recordings that are purported to alter consciousness and allow for further spiritual enlightenment. The music has been described as having an ethereal, warbling quality that many believe enhances, among other things, psychic abilities and astral travel. The experiences Ballard wrote about in 1930 inspired many other stories of encounters with strange beings on Mount Shasta. In 1932, Edward Lasner claimed he knew of white-robed people who hoarded a cache of gold and lived at the 11,000-foot level. And in 1934, a man named Abraham Mansfield claimed he met a whole tribe of Lemurians on the mountain who revealed to him an extensive network of secret tunnels. 2 decades later, spiritualist Earlene Cheney stated that she received an initiation in a secret temple hidden upon Mount Shasta. Before becoming a spiritual guru, Cheney was a Hollywood starlet, possibly explaining her passion and penchant for the elaborate costumes and theatrics which she used in her New Age church and mystery school, Astara, founded in 1951. Writing in her book, Secrets from Mount Shasta, Cheney tells how she and her husband were given instructions to go to Mount Shasta during a channeling session in 1952. While camping at Panther Meadow, located on the south side at about 7,385 feet, Cheney and her husband suddenly felt led to climb farther up the mountain. During their ascent, they were met by a strange young man who seemed to know all about their quest and proceeded to give them his teachings. Eventually, the pair were escorted into a secret place known as the Cave of the Mystic Circle. It was here that they were also introduced to other adepts, including the Ascended Master Kudhumi, who also assisted them with their teachings. The pair's lessons climaxed in an initiation in which Cheney claimed she was shown the inner Great Temple at the peak of Mount Shasta, which featured what she described as a great astral cathedral lit from above by a glorious star. She further stated that these sights can only be seen by the truly initiated and remain invisible to the eyes of lesser adepts and mere mortals. Cheney has also previously claimed to have been initiated in a secret ceremony inside the Great Pyramid of Egypt, which does make her one of a very few select souls on this plane of existence indeed. Current New Agers and occultists claim that Saint Germain and other ascended masters and adepts continue to wander the mountain appearing to seekers, particularly in the area around Panther Meadow. These same occultists will readily explain how the earth is actually hollow and contains numerous secret underground cities, among them Telos, where descendants of ancient Lemuria currently live and are presided over by the Ascended Master High Priest Adama. Mount Shasta is also known for its weird glowing mystery lights. These mysterious floating orbs of light have been reported on the mountain since the arrival of the white settlers and among the Native Americans years prior to that. The best time to observe the lights is usually at dusk, around midnight, and just before dawn. While indigenous tribes of the area thought the lights to be ghosts, New Agers and occultists prefer to think that the lights are from the secret ceremonies of the Lemurians or the Great White Brotherhood. The lights have become so well known that they alone have brought the curious to Mount Shasta. Based on newspaper articles from around the turn of the last century, the lights were observed by passengers on trains that passed by the mountain in the night. The mysterious lights continue to be reported today, and many people have come to associate them with UFO activity that occurs frequently on the mountain. If you would like to perhaps catch a glimpse of these lights without traveling to Mount Shasta, there are live webcams available online which offer 24-hour-day streams of the mountain's peak. There are literally thousands of lava tube caves known to exist on and nearby Mount Shasta. The strangest one is Pluto Cave, which was thought to have been created by a basaltic lava flow almost 200,000 years ago. The tunnel-like cave was sacred to the indigenous tribes of Shasta and was rediscovered by white settlers during the mid-1800s. As it's very foreboding and eerie, it takes its name from the Roman god of the underworld, Pluto. In addition to being called Pluto Cave, it's also known to the locals as Pluto's Cave and Pluto Caves. The cave has garnered quite a reputation in supernatural and occult circles as a place to find extraterrestrials or various entities from the spirit realm that live deep inside the mountain. Recent explorers have reported coming across evidence of sacrificial fires and objects from rituals left behind in the cave by those who've held secret ceremonies and vigils for paranormal or occult purposes. Stories abound of people going insane after spending the night in the cave tube, where they were allegedly confronted by unspeakable horrors. While these tales may be the stuff of wild campfire stories or urban legends, those who have visited the cave do find it frightening and eerie nonetheless. Another strange area located near Mount Shasta is Burney Falls, an amazing natural wonder that pours 129 feet down into Burney Creek in the MacArthur Burney Falls State Memorial Park. President Theodore Roosevelt once remarked that this amazing waterfall should be considered the eighth wonder of the world. There are persistent stories of fairies or fae folk who appear in the mist, or just in the edge of the vision of those who gaze out over the falls. Perhaps these fairies are actually the little people described in Native American legends from around Mount Shasta. It's also stated that these little people will only appear to those who are honestly seeking them for spiritual enlightenment and not just for a paranormal thrill. Burney Falls is located approximately 6 miles north of the junction of Highways 299 and 89 on Highway 229. Fairy sightings have also been reported near the area around McCloud Falls, which is made up of 3 amazing falls flowing into the McCloud River. While the lower and upper falls can easily be accessed by vehicles, the middle falls, reportedly the most haunted, is accessible only on foot. Not surprisingly, the middle of the 3 falls is also claimed to be the best spot for fairy sightings. McCloud Falls is located on Highway 89, approximately 6 miles east of the town of McCloud. Mount Shasta is also considered to be one of the most active hotspots of North America's UFO activity. Those well-versed in extraterrestrials state that Mount Shasta is a prime spot for visiting aliens, and weird lights are often reported hovering near the area at night and have also been spotted disappearing into the mountain. Castle Crags State Park, just south of the town of Dunsmuir, California, along Interstate 5, is also considered to be another active UFO hotspot. The trails in the park lead into strange landscapes of weird, jagged rock formations, and it's the perfect location for encountering anomalous phenomena. While Northern California is full of Bigfoot sightings and encounters, Bigfoot legends seem to be a more modern tale around Mount Shasta. Gigantic humanoid footprints discovered in 1955 at the 11,000-foot level have been said to be those of Bigfoot by some, or of giant Lemurians by others. One of the oddest reports ever to come out of Mount Shasta was in 1962, when a woman claimed to have watched a female Bigfoot give birth high up on the mountain. To this day, New Age seekers, campers, hikers, and even loggers have had sightings of these tall, hairy cryptids on Mount Shasta. Well, there you have it. The strange tale of Mount Shasta. Considering all the paranormal, supernatural, and occult activity that goes on here, perhaps it is no surprise that people have gone missing from the mountain, leaving nary a trace. Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode. In this video, we invite you to join us for 5 of the strangest mountain mysteries from around the world. Be sure to listen all the way to the end for a creepy bonus story. Let's begin, shall we? There's just something about the mountains, be it here in the United States or somewhere else on the planet. Perhaps it's the isolation, the solitude, the somewhat overwhelming realization at just how vast and expansive wilderness can be, and how small and vulnerable we are in contrast. These true stories from these strange mountain ranges are guaranteed to give you chills. Number 5, the Superstition Mountains in Tonto National Forest, Arizona. The Superstition Mountains are a mountain range located to the east of Phoenix, Arizona, in the Tonto National Forest. The range of mountains is recognized for its breathtaking canyons and beautiful volcanic peak. Its reputation for being spooky precedes it, oftentimes overshadowing its natural beauty. This comes as no surprise, especially considering that this mountain range is believed to have a pretty odd history, which all centers around an alleged hidden treasure, the fabled Dutchman's Mine. A treasure which is responsible for the disappearance and deaths of those who've gone searching for it. Some mysteriously disappear without a trace, while others die in an equally strange fashion. One such person is Adolf Ruth, a person who had a long-standing obsession for locating the fabled Lost Dutchman Mine. He elected to head into the mountain and search for the treasure. However, within a few days, he vanished, never to be seen alive or heard from again. While rescuers found a strange note he had written stating, "P.S. Have found the lost Dutchman," when his body was found in 1932, things got even more strange. His skull was discovered with a hole made by what Arizona Central reports to be an Army-style .44 caliber revolver. There has been much speculation as to who killed him and why, but no conclusions have been drawn. Then, as recently as 2010, Phoenix News-Times covered the story of Jesse Campen, a 35-year-old man from Denver, Colorado, who vanished in the Superstition Mountains while hunting for the famous treasure. Initially, there were next to no clues which could have identified him. Denver Post reported that his remains were found, quote, wedged in an inaccessible crevice, end quote. Still, even though his body was found, his death remains a mystery. Some believe that he perhaps fell to his death, but once again, this is not conclusive. Despite all the uncertainty surrounding the history of the Superstition Mountains and some of the inexplicable occurrences which have happened there, people generally agree on one thing. Mysterious, eerie, and strange are all descriptions which adequately describe the Superstition Mountains. Time will tell whether any of its great mysteries are ever solved. Number 4. Mysterious Black Mountain National Park in Queensland, Australia. Black Mountain National Park is located in Queensland, Australia. The mountain is famous for strange occurrences such as disappearances, unidentified creatures roaming the mountain at night, and shadowy figures. The most reported one is the ghost of a medicine man standing on the boulders that cover the surface. Stories are told of herdsmen missing with entire herds of cattle, plane compasses disrupted when passing over, and unsuspecting travelers dragged into the mountain by spectral hands. It is also said that animals are often afraid to go near the mountain, with some halting and some attempting to turn around. While this may be caused by the distinctive smell of the mountains, others think that the animals can sense an evil presence and try to stay away. There are also tales of carnivorous mountain chambers that digest anything that wanders into the wrong cave. A large number of locals suspect that the mountain has huge underground caverns that host an alien civilization that built the mountain. This is widely speculated due to the mountain's slightly artificial appearance. Like so many others, this mountain harbors an array of unexplained mysteries, most of which will likely never be solved. However, it may be best not to know the answers, as the truth may be too dark to handle. Number 3. The Valley of Headless Men in Nahanni National Park, Canada. Nahanni National Park, part of the Mackenzie Mountains region in Canada, has become known as the Valley of Headless Men, and with good reason. For thousands of years, the region was said to be evil, with many tribes refusing to settle there. The ones who did told of mysterious creatures inhabiting the vast forests and restless spirits stalking the area. However, the greatest danger is said to be the violent Naha tribe of the mountains. The tribe allegedly consists of deadly warriors who wear masks and armor larger than normal men. These fighters wield strange and unidentifiable weapons. They're also notorious for decapitating their victims. In the 19th century, a whole tribe disappeared without a trace, and many attribute their disappearance to the Naha warriors. Another case was the 1908 disappearance of the McLeod brothers, who were searching for gold in the area. They were both found dead, with their heads missing, along a riverbank. There are a great number of other cases of decapitation in the valley. For example, gold miner Martin Jorgensen's skeleton was found without the skull in his burned-down cabin in 1917. More people have simply gone missing, with 44 unexplained disappearances by 1969. A large number of people also claim to have seen strange lights in the sky, or a huge ape-like man walking among the trees. To this day, there is no explanation for the mysterious goings-on in the Nahanni Valley, and answers unlikely in the foreseeable future, as the region is still largely unexplored. Number 2. The Big Gray Man of Ben Macdui in Cairngorms National Park, United Kingdom. The mountain of Ben Macdui in Scotland is allegedly inhabited by a large gray creature that many refer to simply as the Big Gray Man. The first reports of this beast were in 1925, when a member of Cairngorm Club, who were well-known peak climbers, reported his experience at the summit of the mountain. He stated that he could hear something other than merely the noise of my own footsteps when descending the mountain. I heard a crunch, he said, then another crunch, as if someone was walking after me, but taking steps 3 or 4 times the length of my own. This indicates that the creature is bigger than a normal human, meaning that it's Scotland's Yeti. The Cairngorm Club member concluded that there's something queer about the top of Ben Macdui, and will not go back there again by myself. Whatever's on top of Ben Macdui is still out there and still unexplained. Number 1. The Untersberg Portals. Among the Berchtesgaden Alps on the Germany-Austria border lies the Untersberg Mountain. It is one of the most mysterious mountains in the world, with legends of Roman emperors buried deep within its bowels, lost civilizations living in its chasms, and strange beasts prowling its forested surface. Many visitors to the Untersberg have reported missing time and waking up on another part of the mountain. Sometimes the distances involved are incredibly long and could not have been traveled in the time lost. People have suggested that this phenomenon is due to alien abductions, time warps, or portals to other worlds. More logical explanations state that people are ill, dehydrated, or falling into a partial sleep as they walk, which leads them to believe that they have been teleported. The Austrian writer Stan Wolf claims to have gone up the mountain with a friend to search for these time slips. They reported finding areas on the mountain where their watches would run faster or slower than usual. Wolf also claims he found a group of men living in a cave who told him that they were SS soldiers from World War II. They supposedly had not aged and believed that the war had only ended recently. Wolf attributes the time anomalies to black crystals called the Gems of Dominion that were given to a group of Knights Templar by a god. These gems could slow down time and provide answers to secrets. Wolf also believes that many portals to other dimensions are on the mountain, explaining why people go missing up there. Could these far-fetched theories reflect some truth, or are they purely the work of fiction? We may never know. But there is a reason so many strange happenings take place on the Untersberg, a reason that may never be understood by humans. And as promised, here's a bonus story for making it to the end of the video. The Creatures of Mount Nyangani. In November 2014, 20-year-old British explorer Thomas Gaisford set out alone to explore Mount Nyangani in Zimbabwe. He had won a university award that funded student trips to remote areas to build confidence. He embarked on the trip alone and planned to reach the summit and stay there overnight. But Gaisford claims a thick fog descended at 3 a.m. leaving him disoriented and lost. Shortly after, heavy rain began to pour. He decided to camp overnight where he was and wait for the peculiar weather to pass. However, in the darkness that surrounded him, Gaisford reported that he had been circled by various creatures that appeared to be observing him. Before he'd set off, the locals had told him to ignore any strangely acting animals as they were not of this world. For 10 hours, he lay there waiting for the fog to clear. When it eventually did, he rapidly left the mountain on foot. What really happened is still unclear. Some say that Gaisford simply became dehydrated and started imagining things. Others believe that he was visited by creatures from another dimension. Perhaps we will never know. Well, there you have it. The strange tales of even stranger occurrences from mountains around the world. Hello, friends. Today we're going to look at some strange cases of hikers vanishing in Australian mountains. Join us. Now, there's been much speculation about what could be causing so many hikers to disappear in the mountains of southern Australia. If you follow this channel and what's been going on all over the world in our national parks, forests, and wooded areas, this may not seem so unique after all. The disappearances of these hikers in Australia is very reminiscent to what we call the missing phenomenon, and it's leading so many, especially in this community, to believe that it could be all connected, part of the same massive disappearances for which the causes are almost always unknown. These are some of the only cases we could find out about that at this point could probably be termed a phenomenon by now, with so many having gone missing and locals being so unwilling to talk about it at all, regardless of who is asking them the questions. Here it is, folks, the strange vanishings of hikers in the Australian mountains. First up, Conrad Whitlock. Conrad Whitlock was 72 years old at the time of his disappearance on July 28, 2019. He vanished under mysterious circumstances after telling his wife that night at around 8:30 in the evening, right before he retired for the night and went to bed, that he wouldn't see her in the morning because he had to go and get some tests done early. Conrad had recently been suffering from headaches and was presumably going to get it checked out. Just before 3 a.m. on the 29th, the E-tag on Conrad's BMW was detected on the Maroondah Highway on the way to Victoria's High Country. 3 hours later, he drove through the entrance gate at the Mount Buller Resort, which was witnessed by several other motorists who all claimed to have seen Conrad himself behind the wheel. Approximately 7 hours after he left his home in the middle of the night, seemingly with no destination or reason in mind, at 10 a.m., his car was found abandoned on the side of the road, and Conrad had seemingly vanished right into the ether. He hasn't been seen or heard from since. When she woke in the morning and couldn't get a hold of her husband, Conrad's wife Mandy called the police and expressed her concerns to them. Then they tracked his phone to Mount Buller, and there his car would be found abandoned and empty, with the keys still in the ignition. After what was described as an exhaustive 6-day search effort conducted to try and locate the missing elderly man, who up till now had shown no signs of dementia or other mental illness, there seemed to be no rhyme or reason why he left his home when he did or drove the route he did, just to end up abandoning his car haphazardly parked on the side of this isolated road. The rescue effort included police, Mount Buller search and rescue specialists, forestry workers, a dog squad, and an air wing. Dozens of searchers and volunteers combed the area where Mr. Whitlock's BMW was found, but it was all to no avail, as no other trace of him has ever been found. The overnight temperatures in the area at that time were dropping to -3 degrees Celsius or 37.4 degrees Fahrenheit, and it had started to snow. It's believed he had no provisions with him at all and was definitely not equipped for such harsh weather. The coroner stated that, because of certain things going on in the world at that time, the pandemic, NSW cadaver dogs weren't able to join the search until months after Conrad had initially gone missing. Peter Towner, a former Victoria police detective who worked on the case, said at the time, "It was a long delay, and that, I think, has compounded the fact that we didn't find him. I don't think we'll ever find him." Coroner Parisa Spanos asked Mr. Towner, "We're about 15 months after the event. Do you know if the cadaver dogs would be expected to find a trace?" His response was, "They were quite confident that if he was there, they would have found him. I wouldn't say they were unsuccessful, they just didn't find him. He wasn't where they searched." It was later discovered that just a few days before he disappeared seemingly into thin air, Conrad was participating in a practice session at a racetrack with his Mustang when he crashed into a barrier. Now, it's alleged that he didn't hit his head, but later witnesses came forward and said that he had a large bruise on his forehead after the incident. This is when his wife says he first started complaining of severe headaches. It was also uncovered by investigators that, right before he vanished, Mr. Whitlock had been searching on his computer for things like amnesia and memory loss. The lapsed Scientologist was even searching about his previous religion with a search of the word Scientology. Mr. Tober believes Conrad's head injuries could be the cause of his disappearance and believes he could have become confused and disoriented when he woke up around 3 a.m. and decided to get into his car for whatever reason and go for a drive. He stated, "My personal opinion is the bang on his head manifested in his mind that he had an underlying serious brain embolism or something like that." Conrad was also recently prescribed what was referred to as a powerful painkiller, which was never found and was presumably on his person when he went missing. The investigators say that all this combined with high altitudes, freezing cold temperatures, and the fact that he hadn't eaten would definitely account for why he most likely succumbed to the elements. Mr. Towner, who now works for the Victoria Police but in the capacity as a public servant since retiring, also stated you could simply slide under a log, under a fern, and you could literally walk straight over top of him and not know there was a body there. He also states he became drowsy and disoriented, and I simply believe he wandered off from that car and met his demise, whether he's just slipped and fallen. Without any other evidence, I have to believe that he's there somewhere. Next up, Niels Becker. 39-year-old Niels Becker, who was described by those who knew him best as strong, fit, and resilient, prepared for months to embark on a 5-day solo hike in the Alpine National Park. On October 24, 2019, Niels left Upper Jameson Hut to start his journey. It seems as though Niels was right on course to complete his 5-day hike, as on October 26, he messaged some family members from Vallejo Gatner Hut to tell them he was heading to Mount Sterling and then heading back to his vehicle on the 29th as planned. He never made it back, though, and that's where the mystery begins. Niels was reported as missing after his family hadn't heard from him in 2 weeks, as they had possibly thought he simply needed more time. Being as he was usually very independent and an avid outdoorsman, especially when it came to hiking, they weren't at first concerned. Once the report was made, though, a group of about 70 volunteers, including the police, a dog squad, air wing, bush search and rescue, state emergency service, and the Department of Environment, searched for him around the clock, looking for Niels in, near, and around the location where he said he would have been hiking, which was Victoria's northeast. They searched the entire week until the weekend, when the search was scaled back significantly, mainly due to the temperatures in the bush at night. Senior Sergeant Damian Keegan said authorities were still appealing to the public for information. Like with any of those searches, we always strive to return loved ones back to their family, he says. We'll continue on with that view, and that at some stage we'll be able to find Niels and be able to give some closure to the family. Senior Sergeant Keegan said the police had a few theories as to what could have possibly happened to Niels Becker. The theories mainly dealt with the freezing cold overnight temperatures and the fact that Niels could have walked out of the search area and succumbed to hypothermia and therefore never been found. This is very likely because nobody was sure which route he was taking to get back to his car. Niels' parents, Johanna and Piers Becker, said their son had meticulously planned the hike for an entire 6 months before heading out and chose the dates he did because he wanted to spend his 39th birthday walking in Victoria's high country. They said he'd been training by walking around Melbourne carrying a rucksack. They also talked about Niels having a high affinity for the high country and how he'd hiked it many times before with no issues or concerns. This was to be the longest hike he'd ever gone on alone, though. Niels loved writing and performing Christian music and lived at home with his parents. Last week I was so optimistic, and my daughter said he'll come out with an epic story. But I think after Tuesday and yesterday, well, we're not so optimistic, Johanna Becker said. His father, Pierre, stated, he's a bit of an independent person. He writes a lot of poetry. A lot of the writing is about the high country around Mount Bueller. Niels' parents asked for anyone with any information to please come forward to the police, especially if they remember having had contact with a solo hiker in that specific or surrounding area. Next up is Warren Meyer. On the morning of March 23, 2008, 57-year-old Warren Meyer left his home to go for a simple hike to enjoy the new spring air. While no one is sure exactly which hike in the Yarra Ranges this very experienced hiker chose to take, there were only 2, with each one able to be completed in about 4 hours or so. Warren's wife kissed him and waved goodbye, expecting him to return in a little more than a 4-hour time frame. He had plans with his wife and some of their friends to meet for lunch that same day, and Warren was a reliable man who wasn't often late, especially without calling. This time was different, though, and when her husband was a no-call, no-show that day for the lunch engagement, she immediately knew something was wrong. Later in that afternoon, Warren's vehicle was found in the Dom Dom Saddle parking area. It seems as though this is where he parked it when he left for his hike that day. Warren Meyer ran a successful civil engineering consultancy business in Elwood, Melbourne, Victoria, Australia, and had no reason whatsoever to have disappeared of his own accord. He was happily married, and he and his wife had 2 children who they adored. He never got to meet his 2 grandchildren, as they were born after he had vanished. His wife believes he would be really enjoying his retirement right now and enjoying their life together had he not vanished off the face of the earth that fine spring day back in March of 2008. Warren's parents passed away, never having received any answers as to what happened to him. He simply walked into the woods for a hike one day and was never seen or heard from again, like so many of the missing people we talk about on this channel. After waiting years to finally have a ruling on how the case was handled and what avenues were taken to ascertain what could have happened to her husband, Ms. Myers received, unsurprisingly, according to her own words, a very unsatisfactory explanation. The inquest determined Warren's date of death was unidentified, his manner of death undetermined, and the place of death unknown. Unbelievable. There are many other factors and concerns the family have about how this case was handled, but to get into the minutiae of each and everything believed by the family to have been mishandled in Warren's disappearance might take away from one simple fact. The fact at the heart of the matter itself. Warren Myers simply vanished, and there's no information whatsoever to even allude to where he may have gone and what might have happened to him. So, as all these hikers continue to vanish, rumor and speculation run rampant through the surrounding towns. Is there someone taking people? Feral humans? Are there cryptids, known or unknown, that are responsible? Is it all or none of the above? Something else entirely? We might never know the answers, as the mountains and forests hold their secrets close. All we can do is continue to search, never giving up in our quest for finding the answers and perhaps bringing some peace of mind and possibly closure to the families of the victims. What is really going on here? Again, there isn't much hope in finding answers. Places so beautiful and majestic create their own legends, ones which outsiders may not know or even hear about. Wild speculation, oftentimes well-intentioned, but more harmful than good for the most part, leads to so many rabbit holes. Rabbit holes which we will continue to jump down into and report on the mysteries we find there. What's out there at night, in the darkness of the unpredictable wilderness? The authorities often say it's mere coincidence. All these people went missing under strange and mysterious circumstances, never to be seen or heard from again, as if vanishing off the face of the earth is a perfectly ordinary thing. Perhaps that's exactly what it's becoming. Mundane, accepted as a part of life for hunters and wilderness lovers everywhere. Can we just sit back and accept that, though? Darkness plays games with the mind. But is it something else entirely, which our human minds cannot even begin to comprehend? We'll let you know what we come up with. Until then, stay safe out there, and always keep a close eye over your shoulder. Well, there you have it, folks. I look forward to your comments about these strange cases. We do ask you to keep it friendly and respectful, please. Meanwhile, be good to yourselves and each other. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you a little farther on down the trail. I'm Steve Stockton, and I'll see you next time.